Outside. Oh, that's good. Since it's been cold for so many minutes. It's like a 10 minute feel. I know I miss all of work. I found usually Wednesday. Oh yeah, they're all on YouTube. If you ever want to go look at it.
Question for you. No pressure on this. It was right there. You're right there. Do you want to touch it? Yeah. Thank you so much. It's very kind of you. You're welcome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Thanks. All right, everybody. It's 5:30. Let's get things kicked off. Okay, so tonight, guys, we get to talk about genetics and epigenetics. First and foremost, show of hands. Who here was told in the past that some breathing room? Who here was told in the past that like 100% of your health outcomes were dependent upon what mom and dad gave you? Yeah. Okay. Let's frame it this way then. What percentage currently accepted in scientific literature? What percentage of our diseases in America right now are genetically driven? 25%?
I would say most of it's probably closer to 60–70%.
Interesting.
Or at least that's what people think.
There you go. Okay, cool. It's actually 5%. Okay. It's currently accepted in America that 5% of the diseases that we're dealing with in the world are genetically driven. I know. It's kind of counter to what everybody else thinks, right? 95% is epigenetically induced. So, what is epigenetically induced? You've got lifestyle factors, environmental load. Something really important that you guys are going to take away from this meeting, so I always love to give takeaways, is these are fancy words, okay? But you're going to be like the coolest person for this party. Something called DNA methylation. Have you guys heard of that term before?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And then what about histone modification? Okay, so these are pretty high level concepts. Anybody here ever take like organic chemistry in school? Okay, so hopefully you guys stay with me. We're gonna get lost in the weeds a little bit and be a little technical, but it's important for you guys to understand. Okay, but my goal today, guys, is to help you guys leave here with hope and understanding of things that wow, we actually have a lot more control over what's happening in the world than what we think. Right? Number two is to help you understand your stress response and something called your HPA axis and how that influences your chronic health challenges. And then again, what would we have control over here moving forward? So again, currently it's accepted that 5-ish% of diseases are genetically induced diseases, something that you had and acquired right when you came out of the birth canal, something that showed up as soon as you got on this, okay? Whereas epigenetic factors or lifestyle-induced factors make up 90–95% of this. And this is where we're going to dive deeper on methylation and histone modification, right? So what are genetics and how do they work? Genetics are basically what you got from mom and dad, right? Your genetics are fixed. We can't change your genome, right? Unless we start to mess around with like CRISPR and DNA splicing and RNA vaccines and things that are happening in the world currently, okay? But for the vast majority of us, unless we're in a lab somewhere, our DNA is fixed. Okay, we can't really change what mom and dad gave us. Okay, but what we can change, what we can influence, is how those genes express, how they turn on or how they turn off, what the gene is encoded to do, and whether we allow it to do it or whether we don't allow it to do it. Okay. So, have you ever wondered potentially why some people with bad genes live a long, healthy life, while others with good genes die at an early age? Or have you ever noticed or wondered, like, hey, we have identical twins, genetically identical people. They have the same genome. Why does this one have heart disease and this one doesn't? Right? Why does this one get cancer and this one doesn't? Right? Those are good questions to ask. And the truth is, the genes are not your destiny. That's where your epigenetics come in. Okay? Genetics are the blueprint. DNA is fixed. Can't really change things like your eye color, your height, or disease. Very important term here. Predispositions, what you have a probability of occurring versus what may occur. Genes are like the hardware for your computer, it's fixed at birth, but what we can influence is our software programs, what we load onto that hardware. Okay, let's take stem cells, for example. Stem cells are a great example because stem cells have the genes, right? Like it's a genetically encoded cell, but that cell hasn't differentiated to perform a certain function, right? All your stems, all your cells, like your heart cells came from stem cells. Your brain cells came from stem cells. Your liver cells came from brain cells. They came from stem cells. So what takes a stem cell that has the same DNA and turns it into a brain cell that has the same DNA as the stem cell? Kind of a crazy concept to think about, right? It's like my brain cell must be different than my liver cell. It is, but it's still the same DNA. Interesting, right? And once a stem cell has differentiated, it can never go back to being a progenitor or stem cell again. Okay. So same thing with twins, like we just talked about. Twins, twins are genetically identical people, but yet they will develop various different disease outcomes over their life cycle. And anybody who knows about like research in the research world, anything published in Science Direct or Nature is like the coolest data that you can possibly find. Okay. What are epigenetics and how does this work? Epigenetics is our lifestyle. It's our gene expression. The DNA doesn't change, but what the DNA is encoded to do can change. Gene expression is like turning something on and off. So we may be coded. I might have a genetic predisposition for heart disease. What do you think it does? Okay. Every man on my father's side has passed away before the age of like 50 from various heart conditions. Okay, so I am genetically predisposed to my heart not to last forever. Okay. However, if I don't make certain lifestyle choices of being a drug or drinking alcohol or exercising or doing certain things, then I can change the percentages in the trajectory of where that's going to take me in the future. With that, cool. So epigenetics are like the software that we can update and change how the body functions. So for example, when our body incurs a ridiculous amount of stress, stress is going to precede our body from releasing something called cortisol or stress hormone. When we have elevations of cortisol, this influences genetic expression and will cause things like weight gain and inflammatory disease processes. Poor sleep, which we do an advanced workshop on sleep, which I would encourage you to come to, will influence genetic expression and increase various disease risks, specifically cardiovascular disease. Same thing, so forth and so on. Now, a really cool study. Ladies, most of you guys are coded with a BRCA1 and a BRCA2 gene. One is oncogenic and one is oncosuppressive, meaning one, if it gets turned on, increases the probability that you develop breast cancer. Whereas the other one, if it gets turned on or turned off, if it gets turned off, increases the probability that you get breast cancer. Because one is a oncosuppressive, oncology, the study of cancer, oncosuppressive, turning off, generating. Does that make sense to you guys? Cool. So one stops it, one turns it off. So very cool thing that is the BRCA2 gene is a oncosuppressive gene. If that gene is expressed, the probability you develop breast cancer is 0. But if that gene is suppressed or turned off, then breast cancer increases by a significant margin, 45 to 65%. And this is where the concept, when we get into it here in just a second, of methylation comes into play. Okay? Because if we methylate something, we turn it off. Okay? We want certain genes to be turned off. We don't want other genes to be turned off. And how things get methylated is something you actually have control over. Now, if you guys take nothing away from tonight, because again, some of the topics we're going to talk about are like advanced organic chemistry. This is the blueprint, the framework that's going to help you to be successful. A lot of people in the world, a lot of people in America, chronically ill, right? Currently accepted 54% of children are diagnosed with one of 20 chronic health conditions. So pediatric population is chronically ill, adult geriatric population is chronic, right? So where do all these diseases come from? Well, disease expression comes from cellular signaling, inflammatory load, different molecules, methylation, things that we're talking about. Okay? Inflammation, though, is a vital and necessary piece of the health equation. Right? If I sprained an ankle and I damaged a bunch of tissue, I would want that thing to blow up and swell up, right? To stabilize the area. And then that inflammatory response of all the damaged tissue is going to tell my brain where to send resources to help heal the tissue. Does that make sense? So acute inflammatory reactions, very beneficial, very healthy for the body. Chronic inflammation, not so awesome, right? And the thing that precedes an inflammatory response is our various stressors. So the example I just gave is a sprained ankle. That's a physical stressor, right? But there's also chemical stressors, and there's also mental emotional stressors. And the cool part about your body, it doesn't really differentiate between what stress is being applied to it. Somebody could like chase you down the street, you turn on a scary movie, eat a whole carrot cake, and pretty much the same things happen inside the body from a stress response, cortisol response, inflammatory node, and disease burden, which is why you can think yourself into states of high blood pressure, right? You can eat yourself into states of blood pressure, and you can move yourself into states of high blood pressure. Does this make sense? Cool. So our variable stressors, we can't avoid all the stressors. So we have to figure out which ones we can control. And then rather than focusing on all of this, we really need to focus on how can we increase the body's ability to adapt, to handle a high stress load, because the stress can magically go away in any of our lives. No, you're like, well, it did, but it doesn't work that way, right? So we have all these variable stressors applying various inflammatory and cellular signal or molecular signalings in the body. And then whether it's acute, which means our body heals from it, or chronic, means we're going to get various disease expressions. Does this make sense to you guys? Cool. So if you take nothing away from tonight, that framework is very important for you to understand. And how does the body perceive and process stress? It starts where? In the, you got it, called your HPA axis, okay? Hypothalamus, pituitary to adrenals. So when the body incurs a stressor, whether it's physical, chemical, or mental, emotional, the hypothalamus, which is like grand central station, is where all information comes through, and your brain has to check it for safety or not safe. Okay? And once it categorizes it as such, then it goes to higher cortical learning centers, and then the body does stuff. Which is really cool how that works. So the hypothalamus, if the input coming in through here is being deemed as a stress-inducing event, then the body is going to release something called chorionic releasing hormone, which will then go to your pituitary gland, which where is the pituitary gland located? In your brain. Nice job. Cool. The pituitary gland releases all sorts of cool hormones, like your oxytocin, your prolactin, so things like bonding and love, but it also releases one of our precursors to our stress hormones. It releases thyroid stimulating hormone. Does all sorts of cool things based upon what the hypothalamus tells it to do. Okay. The hypothalamus gets all of its information from your
What did you say?
Where does your hypothalamus get all of its information? Where does all sensory stimuli start?
From your nerves and your brainstem.
From your nerves in your body, right? And joint position and movement is the highest quantity of information that the body provides the brain, which is why calming chiropractor is so stinking cool, because it helps your brain regulate itself. It helps diminish and makes that nervous system, that stress response so much more efficient because it provides better inputs to the hypothalamus. Right? But then the hypothalamus tells the pituitary gland, the world's burning down. Release ACTH, which then goes to the adrenals, and that causes the body to pump up your cortisol levels, which then suppresses your immune system and does all sorts of other things, so like your leptin, your ghrelin, so appetite suppression, weight gain, your sex hormones, so forth and so on. Okay, so hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenals, cortisol release, chronic stress, chronic cortisol, chronic inflammatory load. This is like your alarm clock being stuck in the on position, meaning it's going to be the precursor to that disease state. Right? Anybody like hang out with babies? Side being? Yeah. Has anyone ever picked up a baby and they were like, oh, baby? Their arms are rigid, their legs are rigid, they arch their back, they threw their head back really hard. You know what I'm talking about? That baby is already stuck in a fight or flight response. Because they are so hypertonic, their body is developing or trying to prioritize engagement of the extremities so they can fight and flight away from their problems faster. Yeah, kind of crazy, right? So those little baby nervous systems that are stuck in fight or flight, what's the trajectory of where they're going to end up in their 20s, 30s, 40s? So I was looking for a little bit here. Okay, so transgenerational stressors. This one's kind of a crazy thing to wrap your brain around, okay, because genetics are passed along, but so are the epigenetic expressions, which is really interesting to understand. So you know this, which I really don't like this term, but you know the term like generational stress, right? I think there's balance to it because the research is accurate, okay, but I also think it's kind of more of a crutch in some cases. So the idea, Epidemic changes caused by environmental factors like stress, diet, trauma, toxins can be passed to future generations. Why would the body do that? Let's say we both grew up in the same tribe, and our tribe was a warring tribe. Would you want mom and dad's and grandma and grandpa's experiences possibly given to you so that way you can survive in that environment better? Yeah. What if we grew up in a famine tribe, right? We would want our bodies to be more efficient at processing or running on less calories. Okay, so this is where the confusion between genetics and epigenetics comes in.
I was just saying it's supposed to be like an instinctual thing that protects kind of what you were saying. So just like, your inherited kind of like senses of things that allow you to make informed decisions basically to where you have the best possible outcomes.
I love that answer and I agree with you. But the confusion comes in from, does that come from my DNA or does that come from the lifestyle? And what the current research is showing is it's the lifestyle that influences that, not so much the DNA, which is kind of cool. So, environmental factors, meaning we grew up in a warring tribe, we grew up in a famine, is going to influence something called methylation and histone changes, meaning there's certain things that bind to your DNA. Have you guys ever heard of has anybody ever watched how a cell divides or how DNA gets encoded and passed along? There's something called transcriptase that transcribes or pairs the pairs together and then breaks off and forms a new genetic code, right? Matching the pairs from the previous one. So histone modification basically makes the DNA so tight. Why is it so tight that it makes it inaccessible for transcriptase to bind to it, to code it and pass it on? So histone modification makes it less likely that that gene gets expressed and passed. Methylation also does the same thing. It doesn't change the shape of the binding site, but it blocks it. It pairs carbon to this area. It blocks it from being replicated. Okay? So that's how things get turned off or how things get tightened. So these modifications affect the germ cell, or the sperm and egg, and the progenitor cells like your stem cells. These altered epigenetic expressions are passed to the offspring, meaning this binding site for this specific gene is so tightly wound, that one's not going to get passed on at a high rate. But let's say we change our lifestyle factors and this kind of unwinds a little bit, and now this gene will be expressed and passed to a future generation. Is this kind of making, it's almost like a locking key mechanism. There's certain things in the body that kind of lock your DNA down and says, I don't want this one to get passed on, or we really want this one to get passed on, but the environment's not letting me do it.
You said that it's not genetics so much as environment, but for the second and third generation, it is partially genetics. It's like the first person that experiencing it would be environmental, but those stressors can live in the body and be passed on through DNA to a degree.
Agreed, but what if the environment changed? Then those.
I think that there would still be that kind of sense of whatever. Like you were saying, I think there would be a sense of it still kind of passed on in the DNA, but obviously it can be changed based on how that next person chooses to handle those things and live their life.
Love that. And that's exactly where this conversation is going. Because of my dad, which was not, let's say he lived his life in such a way that his genetics that he has to be were just trashed and damaged, and I'm projected to get X, Y, and Z. But I didn't like the environment that I grew up in. And so I completely changed that. I had a completely different lifestyle than the different genetic modifications that are occurring based upon these findings will be different because I changed them based upon my choices. And then what I give my children will be a different expression of what dad gave me. That's where this concept of my DNA is fixed is true, but it's not true. Well, it's actually a really hopeful conversation. Because it's like, man, grandma died of this, mom died of this, I'm gonna die of this. And then I just accept it as such. And it's like, no,
Our cells are constantly reproducing and stuff too, which allows for change.
it's correct. And that's where these modifications between histones and methylation can change what gene is being replicated. And then we get more of something we want and less of something that we don't want. But the opposite is true too. What if these binding sites are being taken away from us because of different environmental things, and we're not able to pass along what we want to pass along, even though I am living an effective style? DNA, right? So cool studies on this. There's a massive famines in Sweden. And this is called the, I don't know how to pronounce that, study. And but what researchers showed is that the birth and death records from the small town in Sweden, they found that men who experienced famine during their adolescence had grandsons with lower cardiovascular disease rates. Interesting, right? Whereas the 1%ers during this time, because they kind of think of like, do you ever watch Les Miserables? Or like, you know, one of the people were revolting against like 1%ers. Yeah. Interesting parallels to reality right now. So in contrast, the individuals that were like just gorging themselves on food, their children had higher rates of obesity and diabetes, as you would expect, right? But it's super interesting that lower incidence of cardiovascular disease in the family population. So environmental exposure during critical developmental periods like the neonate period when we're in utero or the adolescent period has a bigger impact. Transgenerational stress and early life stressors. So they continued these studies, right? And what we figured out, so in rodent studies, male offspring of stressed mothers showed an increased DNA methylation of stress-related genes. So there's certain genes inside of us that help us to manage stress more effectively. In these rodents whose moms were like super crazy cracked out on stress, their stress management gene got methylated, meaning it got shut off, it got inhibited. And so then that expression got passed to the child, even though the gene is still there that could be expressed to help you manage stress better. And the same thing is true of histone modification or deacetylation. That plays a key role in silencing the gene by tightening the binding site so that way the DNA can't be replicated. But sometimes you want it to, and sometimes you don't want it to. So these higher states of stress, these higher states of lifestyle factors increase the probability that our offspring experience anxiety, depressions, PTSDs, and cognitive dysfunctions. And the same thing is true in humans as well. Offspring of Holocaust survivors, so children of mothers who were not actually in the Holocaust, had very similar stress-related epigenetic expressions than even though they were in the experience. There's actually some really interesting associations between transgenerational stressors and cancer incidences. Like if this is a little bit more anecdotal, but the data is starting to back it up. If for example, my grandfather was abused as a child, like his dad just like punched him in the stomach, then my grandfather and my father would have higher prevalence of potentially like esophageal or dietary cancers. Super interesting, right? Individuals that had more neck and throat trauma through a certain period of time may genetically predispose their adolescents or children with more thyroid-based conditions. But super interesting. So what is epigenetics? Now that we understand genetics a little bit better, let's talk about epigenetics. No, it's okay. Put yourself at home, guys. Epigenetics is basically our life, our choices that we make every day. That pathogenesis model that I just shared with you are stressors producing the inflammatory response to disease burden. It's the epigenetics are the various stressors that we subject ourselves to, and what can we do about it? So, cool study from Ornish. Lifestyle changes in diet, exercise, and stress-related stress reduction altered various gene expressions in prostate cancer patients within 3 months. So they were able to physically measure it in cancer expressions. That's also why people with a really wonderful disposition on life that are like fighting cancer, do they have higher rates of success? Yeah, because they've got the mental emotional component figured out. But there's also the chemical component and the physical component to those stressors. So again, this is the concept of DNA methylation. This one's a little bit harder. A methyl group is a carbon with 3 hydrogens around it. So that, again, we talk about organic chemistry a little bit. We don't talk about a lot, but there's your basic understanding. So when a gene starts to want to be reproduced, usually one side gets peeled off, okay? And then this other guy comes in and binds to it, reproduces a segment, and that peels off, and the gene gets put back together. And then this guy floats around and creates a new genetic structures. Yeah, you got it. Actually, our videos are coming up if we want to get a little science. Okay. But let's say a methyl group, a carbon and 3 hydrogens, comes in and binds right there on that guy. Then when this thing strips off, this will not be accessible to be reproduced in the future. So this is something called DNA methylation. This is happening to all of us now on a mass and kind of uncontrollable scale. This is a normal part of physiology. This is supposed to happen inside you, but there are things at B now that are jacking this process up dramatically, which is why their developmental rates, cancer rates, chronic disease, like everything is just shot through the roof.
They also the reason why some women, like girls, are having their periods so much sooner than what they used to.
DNA modification, methylation, histone modification, various hormones that are floating around in water and food supplies. Yes, absolutely. And the older we get, the more that we start to look back and recognize it's like schools didn't used to look like that. Like the majority of children did not fit that.
Right.
And now they do. So like
Not doing like postmenopausal, like 51.
oh, I just saw this really cool study out of Japan. They had almost zero postmenopausal symptoms or premenopausal symptoms because they eat excessive. Well, in this study, what they were correlating to was they eat a ridiculous amount of what kind of food?
Rice, fish,
Seaweed, specifically.
Sushi.
Seaweed. Or a really effective thing in like functional health right now for like perimenopausal, postmenopausal is eating Spanish sea moss. It just like iodine, the zinc. Actually, remember Christine who used to work here?
Yeah.
She makes her own. So yeah, you can find sea moss. Okay, but it can dramatically influence iodine, thyroid function, and other peri and postmenopausal symptoms. Okay? So these DNA sequences, the DNA doesn't change, but what binds to them changes, and then that affects what gets passed and what doesn't. So the impact on gene expression, increasing methylation equals, so if you methylate something, it silences it, turns it off. So that BRCA2 gene that we talked about earlier, which is a tumor suppressive gene, ladies will have a BRCA2 gene, you want it to be expressed. You want it to turn on because it lowers your incidences of cancer by like 65%. But if that gene becomes methylated, that tumor suppression goes away. And the probability you experience breast cancer goes up significantly. And so this concept of methylation is also very, very important to the neurodevelopmental community because this community has very interesting methylation problems. Some are too much and some are not enough. So for example, like the vitamins that you take, your B vitamins specifically, if you look on the back of your B vitamins, it says like cobalamin or pantothenic acid. If it doesn't start with methylcobalamin or methylpentothenic acid, the product you're getting is kind of crap. Got it? Yeah. So you do want your B vitamins to be methylated because it makes it more biologically activated. It's easier for your body to use. Right? And it also donates that methyl to a different part of your body to create harmony and organic structure. So this is a really important concept to understand. It is kind of like, I mean, I didn't really learn about this stuff till like 2-3 years ago. Okay, so it is kind of new information in the more functional healthcare world. So increased methylation turns a gene on. Decreased methylation turns a gene on. And both can be bad and both can be good, depends on what gene we're interacting with. Yes.
So if you do have to take like vitamins and things like that, and it's not one of those, is it doing anything to help, or are you basically just wasting your time and money?
Because the bioavailability is so low that you would have to take an excessive amount over a very long period of time to increase levels, which is why some people, not specifically like vitamin D methylation, but some people are like, I'm taking like 10,000 units of vitamin D a day and I'm still deficient. It's like, then you're not absorbing it or it's not the right formulation for your anatomy. Okay. And there are really cool labs that you can run now through companies called like functional health labs or vibrant labs, which we can point you in the right direction. We can order them for you if you want. That show you what your anatomy, like what it requires for a methylation standpoint. Is it too much? Is it not enough? So we can figure this stuff out now. It's just not included under your insurance covered healthcare service. Okay. Yeah, I know that's a different topic for a different.
I actually have a doctor who's actually did significant blood work and stuff that most people won't run, and shortly after that, she actually had put me and her on vitamin D2 at 50,000 units once a week, plus another. We take 3 different D vitamins. We got D2 50,000 that we take once a week, and then we every day except for the day that we take that, we have to take vitamin D3 plus K2 at 5,100. And then of the evening, we take another 5,000 just D3.
Wow. So this is a good example of how true healthcare is getting much more specific to the individual versus like, hey, let's come in for your annual physical, let's run your CBC, CMP. Oh, your numbers look good, doc, I don't feel good. Oh, your numbers look fine, we'll see you in a year. Okay, because there is a lot of uniqueness among us because we all have our own individual genetics. And this equation is happening inside of all of us. It takes a little bit more effort to figure that out. Okay, so methylation in action. Normal healthy methylation turns genes off that shouldn't be active, like cancer-promoting genes. Keeps the immune system genes function properly, and also helps with brain development and memory function. Abnormal methylation, meaning too much, suppresses genes like that oncosuppressive gene, which means we have higher incidence of cancer, anxiety, depressions, or various disease manifestations. Hypomethylation, too little, causes an overactivation of genes. So, would you want to treat the hypermethylator and the hypomethylator the same? No, this one needs more, this one needs not so much, right? We need to figure out how to kick off more methyl groups in this person. We need to figure out how to increase the affinity and binding of methyl groups in this person. 2 different problems to have.
What if you have both problems in different areas?
Great question. Don't know the answer to that one. Great question. Then we probably have to find targeted approaches in what order, and probably there's something a little higher.
No, it sounds crazy, but it is possible.
Yeah. Definitely, but super interesting. So epigenetic influences on methylation data. So nutrients like folate or methyl tetrafolate.
Methylfolate reductase.
Yes, methyl tetrafolate or folonic acid. There's some really cool literature coming out about like neurodivergent individuals or autistic individuals taking folonic acid, which is a different or a precursor to folate, seeing dramatic things happen.
I've got a nephew that he is in the National Business Journal because he has a genetic disorder that nobody else has. And it's some kind of neurodivergent thing that he's going to be on like a feeding tube, and then his vision, and never think he'd ever walk, but he's walking.
That's cool.
Yeah, he's a twin.
Oh, cool.
The girl, she is great, thriving, and he's the one that's having all the issues.
Great example, right? We have epigenetic expression and a genetically identifiable profile. So what happened in this equation that didn't happen in this equation, right? Or maybe the differentiation between male and female, which happens around 4 weeks of development and gestation. Because all babies start with XX. And then they differentiate. That's why everybody has.
Doesn't that start around like 12 weeks or something? Start like 10 or 12 weeks?
Yeah, it's exactly. Differentiation occurs. So, but anyways, things like folate, which we get from various food groups, B vitamins, specifically the bioavailable components that we get from food, and not necessarily always supplementation. Choline, do you know what food has the highest content of choline? Eggs. Yeah. Support proper methylation. Okay, so all of this really, the crazy part is like, we get super heady with this stuff and like trying to figure it all out. Like, oh, do I take what supplement today? You boil it down. No, but when you boil it down to health practices, it's like, oh. So if I just do this every single day forever for the most part and kind of eat with the cycles and the seasons and where energy goes and like how things were designed to be a long time ago,
But if I eat
less
eggs,
issues.
every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, because I really do love eggs. But I still have issues with that. Like I have MTHFR, methyl-tetrahydrofolate reductase. And so yeah, like I don't know. And most of the medicine that people recommend don't work worth nothing. It is not, it's no good, especially the over-the-counter stuff.
You brought up a good term called reductase. So there's a process in organic chemistry called reduction or oxidation. Okay, one is donating, and one is taking away. So if you have a reductase problem, you have a addition problem. If you have an oxidizing problem, you have a subtraction problem. So you have too much of something, most likely.
Okay, I'll think on that for a minute.
So again, correlates back to just the general lifestyle factors, dietary applications, and where do we get methyl donors from our dietary profile, which we'll talk about in a second. Stress is the other one, but that's more mental emotional component. So this is our chemical stress. This is our mental emotional stress. Chemical, physical, and sleep is a big dog in that fight. Because with sleep, there's different stages. There's something called REM and NREM, and NREM has 4 separate stages. And if you don't hit all 4 in your brainwave activity, your body doesn't do the cellular repair that it's supposed to. And guess what's really cool that we all look at every day that messes with that process? You got it. Blue light after sundown is now classified as a 2A carcinogen because of how it influences this process.
Alarm clocks also mess with that, right?
It can. But which one here, guys, is our environmental toxins? Things that a lot of products that are being used. So you want to, if you're drinking plastics, which I don't recommend, you want to be BPA free. Because BPA is going to dramatically influence things like thyroid and sex hormones and increase probabilities of cancers. So a good example of denamethylation is cancer. We already talked about this one, that BRCA gene. Okay. Here is volume on this. I don't really want volume on this because she is super technical. Okay, cool. So this is an example of DNA. Okay, parts of the DNA, our C and Gs, are bound with methyl groups, meaning what? Can these guys be copied now? Nope. Methyls mean inhibition, right? It's blocking. So the DNA has something called histone tails, which these are different binding sites. Okay? But when histones get modified, it tightens the structure and makes it less accessible for something called RNA transcriptase to come in and bind to it and reproduce the DNA. So that's really what's happening on a macro scale inside of us. So how environmental chemicals disrupt methylation? Certain chemicals and toxins can either increase or decrease, meaning suppressing or activating. And various chemicals that cause this are particularly coming from our heavy metals, like our cadmiums, our arsenic. You guys know what food group, which we all eat a lot of, has the highest level of arsenic? It's on where it's farmed from, but it's also soil. Rice. Like the shells and casings of rice contain a high level of arsenic. But things like our aluminums come from what we cook with and also what we're injecting into people, right? I'm not sure if any of you guys cook with aluminum, like over a stove or we wrap things in aluminum, throw it in the oven.
Yeah.
I encourage you to get away from that practice. Parchment paper is definitely better. Unbleached parchment paper is a much better alternative to that. Right?
So what's the best thing to cook with? Because
Cast iron and silicone and
I'm trying to find out from
stainless is not the worst.
my cousin what this is Hunter, but he's got collapsed ear canals, which is part of the genetic Alzheimer's. What does it think he's losing his hearing now? Yeah, so I'm trying to find exactly what they call it because it's like nobody else.
So rare.
It's so rare.
Now, usually things are so rare, we have a hard time finding things that work because there's so few people. But if you take more of a macro perspective of like, okay, he's got an interesting antidote to him.
Yes.
What are the things that I know? Okay, we're going to feed him this way. We're going to do these therapies. We're going to make sure he sleeps in this rhythm and cycle. Those are the things that can help upregulate the best expression of potentially a genetic predisposition. That actually correlates a bit more to our workshop next month on neurodevelopment and gut health. So primary sources of cadmium, guys, is tobacco smoke, metalworkers, jewelry makers, and unfortunately, root vegetables that are grown in contaminated soil. A lot of our soils, because of our lovely ag practices in America, have a lot of junk in them. One of the big dogs is glyphosate, or the primary ingredient in your beloved Roundup. The weed killer, Roundup.
They banned that?
They did. So they did, but then that company filed for bankruptcy, and which is Monsanto, and then they got bought by a different company, and so they still make the same product. Okay, Same thing with like the Sackler thing, Purdue Pharma, when they got hit with all those massive fines for the massive opioid epidemic, bankruptcy, opened up a new company, and a treatment program.
Right, I understand that deficit.
Yep, you got it. That was such a good.
That was.
You guys have not seen the series Dope Sick, they have done such a good job of showing how research can be funded and manipulated. And then lobbying does this, and then
Yeah. June 6th to 12th, I'm going to Appalachia to actually Kentucky on a mission trip.
Cool.
First time we've ever been.
That's
Did
good.
you know that there's actually a book too?
Yeah.
I got to meet the author.
Oh, cool. That's a beautiful book, but my team did a great job.
He sure did.
So if you guys haven't seen it, I'm encourage you to check it out. Sorry, I got off track there, but, glyphosate, sorry, one of our most common pesticides is heavily, like those levels are incredibly high. They have very, very, very common baking too. Do you know which company? Yep, Gerber and Quaker, okay? If any of you guys consume Quaker oats or Cheerios, you need to stop consuming.
Cheerios, are you kidding me?
They have the highest levels of glyphosate of any foods tested.
Wow.
Cheerios, Quaker oats, Nature, Kind,
I think it is the Elizabeth.
Kind bars.
The Elizabeth type, that brand is Elizabeth, they're like, it's, I mean, it's got high protein.
Cool. They just gotta be careful about this stuff. So there's a really cool website, and cool app. It's called EWG, Environmental Watch List something. But basically they will help you, like if you're going through the grocery store and you're curious about certain products, it'll tell you what burden that product is going to potentially place on that product.
That's what for like, cosmetics too, right?
Yep, cosmetics, shampoos, cleaners, laundry detergents. And then when you start diving down this rabbit hole, you're like, burn it down. There's nothing I can buy at the store. What am I doing here? So you guys ever heard about meat glue?
What is?
Meat
Oh,
glue.
that keeps it red?
So they will take like the pustule, like the really nasty parts of the meat that the butchers aren't going to use and serve to anyone. And they basically mix it with this chemical compound called meat glue, and they wrap it in cellophane and they put it in the freezer. And in like 2 days, they pull it out and it looks like a beautiful filet mignon. And that's the kind of meat that typically gets served at the majority of like our chain-based restaurants. So if you guys haven't read about meat glue yet, I would encourage you to do so. So all of these chemical exposures influence methylation pathways and can disrupt that. Again, it'll mess with key nutrients and absorption of those, like folate, vitamins, and choline, which is where we have the methylcobalamin versus the cobalamin. Okay, and some people need more methylation, some people need less methylation. But these chemicals can deplete these nutrients and block methylation enzymes, which means then things don't get transferred. And then we also talk about the oxidative response, which is what we just discussed. Oxidation is losing, reduction is gaining, kind of different than what you think. Okay. So top environmental toxins that disrupt DNA methylation, your heavy metals, lead, arsenic, cadmium, mercury. Polluted water, old paint, pesticides, seafood, unfortunately, dental work. Man, there's a huge push right now in the more like functional or biologic dentistry space with all the old metal that you guys have put into your body, and how that leaches and how that influences cardiovascular disease, myocarditis, and heart attacks. My dad there's a really cool, amazing, functional integrative cardiologist down in the Murfreesboro area. His name's Dr. Cable or Cabell, C-A-B-E-L-L. He is amazing. He is so cool. He is like the most holistic cardiac person I've ever met. And he is either married to or refers a lot to this specific biologic dentist down in Franklin area. I try to recruit these guys to come this way, but we always have to go to Franklin. And so she goes in and basically redoes all the old dental work. It is not cost effective.
What do you mean metal?
Metal, like the fillings that people get.
Those are metal?
Yeah.
So I have implants. They're titanium. And titanium supposedly is a non-leaching metal. I'm sure in 20 years that'll change.
Implants.
Yeah, but that wasn't.
It's very painful.
Well, I wasn't born with permanent teeth. So when I lost my first set of incisors, my canines actually came in here. And so I had a brace for like 3 years. I had to pull the canines back and then I had to put teeth.
Are all of them metal or just the ones that look all gray? No, I mean like, peelings and stuff.
Also,
I was
they
just,
started to switch like the ceramic, but
yeah, I
there's-
don't have very, like, but 2 or 3 or whatever. When I was 17, whenever I first got a cavity, I know that you couldn't even tell, it was some kind of like, it looked like enamel.
well, a lot of individuals look older than us, have a whole lot of metal float around the mouth that's dramatically influencing cardiovascular disease. And people will have impaction where it doesn't show up on blood tests, but if you culture it, you will have like abnormal low-grade infection throughout your mouth. And the vascular supply from the mouth to the heart is the direct supply. And so that bacteria then goes to the heart and causes a lot of cardiac issues. Why, like when your body has an infection, so like it'll push it out of your body, right? Like it'll create pustule cells and push it out. So the calcification of the artery, that white calcium-based deposit, is really an immune reaction in some instances. And your body's trying to isolate and solidify various infection or cardiac issue. So, so quoted there, found that arsenic caused hypermethylation of tumor suppressive genes. So arsenic turns off genes that suppress cancer. Good job. You can almost have to read it in a different language. Pesticides, glyphosate, we talked about that one. Organophosphates, though, are another big player in the game. And the baby products that have the highest level tested or the highest tested levels of glyphosate are your Gerber baby foods. And any of those like puffed grains.
Oh my goodness.
Okay,
Cereal things, yeah.
Anybody familiar with baby-led weaning? Because we didn't have processed food back then. So the babies would go from breast to food.
Well,
They would start eating food, soft food. So protein.
and
bone marrow.
my grandson, when he was born, they gave him just whole milk. I mean, it was just, you know, they would express, you know, her milk and then freeze it, and of course they would warm back to the thaw, but then leave it in the refrigerator, or put it in the bottle, and would just feed him whole milk. Like, that's part of what helps you sleep is warming it up, right?
Yes, and temperature messes with protein structure. So depending on how warm you make it, where you may actually denature or break down the protein structure of what makes the milk good in the first place. That's why I said to go from good. Cool. Excuse me. So let's keep going here, which is what we're going to talk about. So, really sad studies. But right now, it's currently deemed like people are putting needles into the while baby's growing and pulling out fetal cord blood from the umbilical cord. They're currently seeing around 200 to 250 carcinogenic chemicals that are not meant to be there. So a lot of these things in the world that they say, oh, don't worry, like you can, like you won't absorb, like it's crossing blood-brain barriers and going everywhere in the body and into fetal tissue. So, oh, there's EWG, environmental working group. That's what I wanted to communicate to you guys. So in this study, small study, but I don't know how many people would allow needles to be injected into babies. Out of 287 chemicals detected across samples, 180 were known to cause cancer in humans and animals. 217 are toxic to the brain and nervous system. That shouldn't shock anyone with the current incidences of the autism rates being estimated to go to 1 in 3 from 1 in 56 when I first started this conversation 10 years ago. And 1 in 3 children have some sort of neuroatypical presentation. Last 2-3 years ago, it was 1 in 36. When I first started this conversation 10 years ago, it was 1 in 56. Okay, so it's happening more often. Another study measured 59 potentially harmful chemicals in maternal and umbilical blood samples collected in San Francisco, and they found that that was crossing the membrane and going directly into the fetus. So again, guys,
Mostly in the United States, because of what we've allowed versus what other countries.
like in the European Union, South America, there's like 3,000 to 5,000 chemicals that are allowed here that are allowed in places as well. That's also why people who are like gluten intolerant, celiac disease, go to Italy, eat some pasta, and they're like, oh,
I have a cousin that's got that, I don't know, but you'll see what.
yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Say that again.
People with like severe celiac disease or with severe gluten intolerances or food sensitivities will go to other countries, eat the food that causes the disease here, and it doesn't cause the problem. Seriously.
Can go to Italy and.
It probably won't have a negative impact on it because of how agriculture and formation occurs. Seriously, like look up, or if you go to the grocery store here around town, don't get too crazy, but find an authentic imported derived product from Italy, cook that noodle, see it, only eat one, see how you do. You'll probably-
Nicoletto's and Donaldson, they make their own pasta.
Gotta be careful where you're sourcing your greens from, and also milling greens. Okay, because from milling time to consumption time dramatically affects the bioavailability of nutrients. My ask this year for Christmas was a grain one. And I did not, so that's okay. There's attachment to a KitchenAid to build grain, but it burns out the motor in the KitchenAid pretty fast, so we haven't gone that route, but I really want to bring color. And guys, I'm not going to touch on this in depth. I really just want to present the idea to you. Because it's not within my scope of practice to really talk about this. Okay? Vaccines. Let's just address the elephant in the room. Okay? Every single vaccine that is on the schedule, if you pull the insert and you actually read it, section 13.1 of every vaccine that's on the schedule says that this vaccine has not been evaluated for carcinogenic or mutagenic effects or its impairment in fertilities. Meaning, this has never been studied on the impact that it's going to have on your DNA or the DNA of your children. Ever. And if you follow Robert F. Kennedy Jr., or you follow that court case all the way to the Supreme Court, it was just proven that nothing on the schedule has ever been studied against the placebo in the last 32 years.
This is why I have
So,
Or against them. Yes.
that is not within the scope of practice. However,
How are we doing any kind of research or anything if they're not even?
not actual placebo-controlled trials. They're not injecting water and saline compared
So
to.
where are they getting their information from then when they say that they like?
I would encourage you to check out ICANN.org, Informed Consent Action Network. Del Victory and those guys and the data that they are publishing and what they are proving. ICANN.org is where you will find a lot of the answers to these questions. Okay? So top environmental toxins that disrupt DNA methylation, heavy metals and adjuncts. Okay? Top environmental toxins, air pollution, particulate matter, diesel exhaust. That's going to mess with us. Okay? Flame retardants. This is a big one I want to hit on. PBDEs. We all spend 6 to 10 hours a day, usually in less clothing than we wear normally, laying on what? Your sheets and mattress. Your mattress is gassed with PBDEs. Because if a fire starts in your home, you don't want to burn up while you're sleeping. That's why it is there. Okay? However, this chemical jacks up your thyroid real bad. Okay? So there are mattresses that they make that are non-toxic. What is called an avocado mattress. It is very comfortable.
Oh my gosh.
We got one on Black Friday, maybe 6-7 years ago. Avocado mattress, non-toxic. It will definitely not have those flame retardants in it. Have you guys been reading about or starting to study the effect of our clothes on us and the vibrational frequency of polyester compared to organic cotton and the impact that has on testicular function and vaginal flora and your microbiome and this gets real interesting when you start to dive down there. Okay. Alcohol and tobacco, we know both of those impair methylation pathways. They impair the liver specifically, and the liver is one of the primary organs that helps you to formulate and utilize your B vitamins, as well as manage and correlate or manage and generate cholesterol. And cholesterol is so vitally important to your nervous system to develop in brain the formation of white hormones. Okay. So how to protect against methylation damage? It's a little crazy. We've got to be better conscientious consumers. We got to figure out what products that we should be using and not using. And the really hard part about that is all these really beautiful startups that start things the right way the first time around get bought up by Nestle and other larger corporations, and they change the formulations, and then it's not good for you anymore. So you have to sit and not stay on top of it.
Jonathan asked about the vaccine.
Yeah.
Way back before
Mhm.
some of the old vaccines, that they could get polio or whatever.
Mhm.
Have they been changed by the pharmaceutical industry? So like if they were okay,
That's a good question.
have they been changed? So like,
That's a good question.
because obviously, I'm gonna also have that MMR.
Mhm.
Like, did that change from 50 years ago when I got it?
I would assume yes, but I don't 100% know the answer to that question.
Was it more safe when I got it and less safe now? I'd like kind of like.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that one. That's a good one though. So how to protect against methylation damage? We want to eat certain things, and we want to reduce certain chemical exposures, and we want to support detox pathways and just help our body do its job. So, for example, methylation pathways, we need folate. Folate comes from leafy greens particularly, and we want the bioactive version, which is why we want to eat it from living food, so that way it can donate good stuff to us as our body digests it. Okay? That's where your spinaches come into play. B12, mostly animal products. Do you guys know what food could be a food if we just eat it? What animal product contains the highest dosage of bioavailable B vitamins? What part of the animal?
Brain. Liver.
Liver. If we all ate liver more, we would have very few B vitamin deficiencies. Okay.
I mean, gizzards are better, but too bad.
Only from eggs, and then beets have babenite in it, but also beets contain a very high load or dosage of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a necessary molecule to keep our cardiovascular system.
Yeah, not at all, so.
Beets, beet juice, liver,
Juice.
Yep. All the stuff that we used to eat, but we don't anymore.
If you can read that, that's his disorder.
Ooh, okay, letters and numbers. You have to email that one to me.
Okay.
I may have to look into it for you though. Okay. Reduction of chemical exposures. This is where the EWG comes into play, but we have to be very conscientious of what we're using. Like, did you guys see the most recent thing about Teflon? One small scratch on a Teflon pan releases about 10,000 microplastics into the body. Microplastics is kind of like a trending topic right now because it's messing with people. I don't know an effective way yet to get it out of our system. I know there are protocols for it, but I don't know. Yes.
I was gonna say, if you like making your own juices, beet juice with spinach and a little bit of green apple is.
Throw some pomegranate too. Detox pathways. Okay, it's constantly help the body to get stuff out of us. Number one, through shredding, which is why saunas are a really good idea, and also just physical output and exercise. There's also a really interesting study that shows if you sauna like 3 to 4 days a week, your incidence of cardiovascular, like the probability you have a heart attack is like 60%.
I just went to the gym yesterday, it's got a sauna and ice.
Good. And that's actually one of the places next door because it supports holistically what we do.
Yeah, and the red, was it?
Red light therapy.
Yeah, red
Yeah.
light therapy.
Red light therapy has to be as close to the skin as possible for it to be effective. So if you see those like red light rooms where people like sit in a chair,
Not doing anything.
doesn't do a lot.
Yeah, no, my daughter-in-law had the red light, night lights and stuff in the nursery.
So different impact. Nervous system regulation. Being in a red light environment will downregulate the nervous system. So very good for stress response. But if you're trying to use photobiomodulation or light-based therapy to like kill fat cells or to help the body to build more blood vessels to a damaged tissue or area, it has to be applied directly to the skin.
What about like the salt case? Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Salt
So
case.
again, more nervous system regulation than photobiomodulation. Okay. So still good that the light's penetrating your eyes versus your skin. Okay. The depth of penetration here is going to be very minimal, or the depth of penetration here is going to be really good, and it will influence neurochemistry. Okay, but it won't do the fat loss stuff or the other things that you could potentially use red light. Okay. Good question.
I had never actually heard about the red light stuff until a little while back. I went to do a waxing thing because getting looking chin hairs and stuff. But whenever I was doing that, I have really sensitive skin, and so it doesn't matter which kind of wax they use because even when they would use the stuff that's for the sensitive skin, like I would just break out really easily, and over time it's gotten a little bit better, but like they told me about the red light thing, and that was something that they would end up doing after waxing, because they said that it would actually, like kind of cut down on bacteria and stuff, and like help it to heal without having a reaction.
Yeah, during the COVID, period of time, people were using those UV lights to sanitize things because
Yeah.
light kills different forms of bacteria that we're supposed to be interacting with. Liver detox. Liver gets very congested, especially for a lot of us, with various lifestyle practices. We consume a significant amount of sugar, or really any sugar. Anything that ends in OL, like your alcohols, your sterols, your steroids, anything that the last two letters is OL, is broken down into sugar in your body. So supporting the liver is very, very important. Running is a great way to support the liver, but also two things: milk thistle and dandelion root are great things to help cleanse the liver. Also, if you pair those two things, so for example, Smitty said juicing, if you put those two things in, and you also add parsley. Parsley is incredibly beneficial and synergistically will help clear the kidneys and the liver simultaneously. N-acetylcysteine, NAC, and NAD are both two products that are very beautiful things to use, and they really help with this histone methylation process. Stress reduction. So just get your body more resilient in managing stress. Focus on your breath work. Focus on all things you can do to regulate your HPA axis, like sitting in a red light or Jim's club. Because when you get adjusted, it lights up your prefrontal cortex and changes your HPA axis. That's why every time you come in and get adjusted, you leave the office, you're like, oh, the world's not so bad. There are really nice people there. You're like, when they're getting adjusted, and they're like, yeah, it is. It dramatically influences your neurochemistry. And so getting adjusted is a beautiful nervous system processor and regulator.
What is it, HPA called again?
Hypothalamus pituitary adrenals. So your HPA axis is how your stress response works in the body. We covered that in the first 5 minutes of the workshop,
Yeah.
but I'd be happy to circle back to it. You were just a minute before.
Okay. Well, I have a coworker that's got a tumor on her pituitary, and they can't really do anything with it.
Yep.
But it's all her,
Thyroid.
emotions and
Bonding.
everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And then sleep patterns are a huge game changer. Sleep should be so sacred and protected. And it's literally the reboot, the hard reboot to our processing system.
That's the issue. You cannot sleep.
And if you sleep, then your longevity, the correlation to sleep and longevity is so highly correlated. And you cannot bank sleep. Meaning, if you have 3 consecutive bad nights, you can't just have then back it up with 3 good nights of sleep. It's an exponential compounding problem where if you have disruptions in sleep, it takes you 2-3 times longer to work back to baseline. You cannot bank that back. Okay? So we're going to dive from methylation into histones. Okay, your DNA is approximately 6 feet long. Yeah, but it's bound and wound and spiraled in such a way that it compresses into the nucleus of a cell. Oh, I know. It's like one of those. God, that's amazing. So, histones are protein molecules and are wrapped in spools, and it's wrapped around the DNA. The DNA is wrapped around it. It's all one big thing. But the more tightly bound this is, the less accessible it is to our body to be able to change it, to activate it, to suppress it, to code it, to pass it on. So why histones matter? Histones control how tightly or loosely the DNA is mounted, meaning its ability to be expressed and read. If we have loose DNA wrapping, meaning if it's open, then it's open for business. It's like, hey, come find me, I'm doing my thing. I'm shining bright like a star. But if it is tightly wound, then we are going to be suppressing that process, and we can't access it. So it means we can't turn it off, we can't turn it on, and we can't replicate it. Right? So how histone modification affects your health? If it goes wrong, if we have acetylation, big fancy terms. Basically, these are different organic chemistry terms, meaning something's being put on it, something's being taken off of it at certain sites based upon what number of carbon it is. But basically, if we have histone modifications, DNA methylation, phosphorylation, ubiquitination, it messes with gene activation, silencing, repression, activation, repression, suppression. And it's also going to result in the expression of various disease burdens. It's a little heavy there, So conditions linked to this, cancer. Hypermethylation of tumor suppression genes is going to increase the probability of cancers. Environmental triggers for this, heavy metals, vaccines, foods, smoking, tobacco, BPA's, plastics, and your flavor charts, right? Obesity, increased histone acetylation of metabolic genes coming from your phthalates and your glyphosate. Food, and the crap in it. Infertility, histone acetylation from your phthalates and your BPA. Again, plastics. You guys, have you started to see that your shampoos are saying phthalate free?
Yes.
I hope you are. Same, ladies, your cosmetic industry is so terribly regulated. And there are so much crap in your common shampoos, like the little stick on your razor, the moisturizing stick on your razors.
I use it.
But it's like just these little things that you don't think about. The adhesions and band-aids. The adhesive and band-aids.
People like
It's
Lonnie, I'm actually allergic to adhesive.
Yeah, no, the adhesion that is on the traditional like Band-Aid brand, cancer resistant. Yeah. So like all these little things that you don't think.
That and like the little things that they put over like say an IV or something like that,
Yeah.
I'll break out. And I've even had it do it from like the, whenever they'll like do those scans where they put all those sticky things on you, it'll cause me to break out
Yep, the adhesions.
really bad.
That's causing an histamine and the mast cell response, the inflammatory reaction. Anxieties and PTSD, pesticides and stressors, and then neurodegenerative or neurodivergent, heavy metals and various pollutions. Okay? So things that we can control. Really cool. Natural assimilation boosters, so things that affect how tight or loose these things occur. That is something called resveratrol, okay, found in red grapes, red brine, and also now is like a supplemental form that you can take. Incredibly beneficial to female hormone. Let's see here. Curcumin, that's the easy one, right? This is the primary ingredient, or curcumin is another name for turmeric. Turmeric is a heavy anti-inflammatory based spice. However, curcumin, to make it bioavailable, typically needs to be bound synergistically with another spice. So when you combine curcumin and black pepper, it helps it not be as conjugated or filtered out.
How much do you have? How much do you use?
A significant portion.
But you're saying that
But if you microdose, I do a little bit every day, like my kids, when I make their breakfast, eggs.
Oh, yeah.
It has turmeric in it, it has black pepper in it, it has organic Himalayan sea salt in it, it has cayenne pepper in it.
that's like how I make mine. I
Cayenne
have to
pepper.
leave the cayenne out of hers.
I think it's a beautiful vasodilator. It really helps increase vascularity, increases blood flow.
That's exactly what I put on my case.
I love it. I love it. That's great. Throw some garlic in there, and that's a really good food as well. Sulforaphane, which comes from broccoli, cruciferous vegetables. I'm a little mixed on this one, personally, but sulforaphane is a cancer suppressant. It reduces tumor growth.
Like broccoli sprouts.
I think sprouts are a better option than the actual mushroom plant,
Broccoli.
but also broccoli is not a naturally derived plant.
Yeah.
It is humans made.
What?
Check it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
So broccoli sprouts are still.
Yes,
So
but the micro, like the bioavailability of nutrients, kind of like how long before grinding and milling grain it losing its effectiveness.
So broccoli's not living, like, it's not like it's something that just grew.
It's a hybridization of a different
what?
mustard. Mustard seed.
That would make sense, thinking about what the mustard is.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe that's correct, but I haven't told that piece.
What about cauliflower? Wait, what about
There are
cauliflower?
quite a few that kind of fall off that bridge from hybridization.
But like cabbage.
But red cabbage, I know has some really cool benefits. Sauerkraut specifically, amazing. Please eat a spoonful of sauerkraut every day for the health of your microbiome. You really won't need to buy a whole lot of probiotics if you just eat a spoonful of sauerkraut.
Lady that she does her own, what do you call it, with the sauerkraut, it's perfect.
Fermented foods are very, very beneficial for you.
Sauerkraut's not as bad as what people think too. I like rinsing it and doing stuff with it, but most people just don't like the sour, which you can rinse it off.
That's part of the kid's breakfast. It's egg, sauerkraut, pumpkin seeds, you know, couple of berries or something like that. Sometimes we
That's got a lot of-
we're yeah, but
I always thought I never would taste country because I thought this was like, bad milk, but it really don't taste.
but
You had to fix it. with stuff.
still gotta be careful about dairy. Natural, this is acetylation, so histone deacetylation. Inhibitors of this process are green teas, your polyphenols from there, also very, very good for cancers as well. Speaking of cancers, are you familiar with Dr. Otto Warburg and the Warburg effect? Won the Nobel Prize, I think, in the late 1800s and figured out like what the metabolic pathways of cancer are. And it basically, if you shut off the food supply, cancer goes away. One of my dear friends and mentors, Dr. Pete Sulak, who practices out in Knoxville, last year was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer and was given a 0.002% chance to live past 6 months. Cured himself in a very short period of time with some of the stuff that we're talking about today. But you have to understand its food supply, it's got primary, secondary, and tertiary per month in order.
Do all cancers feed on the same things, or do different cancers feed on different things?
Good question. Don't know the answer to that. Worth the Google or worth the deep dive and research on. Okay. The balance histone and histone modification and methylation. Balancers again on our leafy greens are betadines from quinoa. Quinoa is also the only sprouted grain that has a full spectrum, a broad spectrum of branched chain amino acids. You can get the majority of your protein supply or amino acid needs from quinoa as long as you consume the protein. Encourage proper histone phosphorylation. Phosphorylating something is adding a phosphorus group to it. Important from magnesium and omega-3s specifically. And to protect against ubiquitination, you want to consume things like cilantro, parsley, chlorella.
What is the best magnesium? There's different types of things.
The question depends on your chemistry, but typically magnesium glycinate or succinate has a higher affinity or a greater utilization than magnesium citrate. And magnesium citrate is what you will find in. So if you would like your vitamin C's where it's ascorbic acid.
Isn't there another one?
But chlorella is a really cool binder and detoxer. I do the greens thing every day. What do you look for? Chlorella? It's like a sea algae. It's in this greens thing that I drink every day, and it has basically everything that we just talked about here in that product. And so I put my parents on it, I drink it. I did drink it. It's not cheap, but it also has like everything in it for like your daily allowances, your reds, your greens, your adaptogens, your mushrooms, your pre-probiotics, your enzymes, like it's all in this. So it's a very, for what you get for it, it's very cost effective.
Flavor, sweetened.
That'll taste good.
I'll take options too.
Oh, okay.
So I just, that tastes terrible, but that tastes great. Okay. But
So it doesn't have stevia or.
you can get a stevia, but I'm putting it. I go sweet if you, I can grab it for you if you want to look at it.
I'll take option two.
Yeah,
Like, more cilantro.
Oh, so cilantro is great, but both, they do two different functions, right? And then various lifestyle strategies, so like vitamin D synthesis. Fasting is one of the most underutilized tools that we have available that is biblical in nature. We are meant to be in fasted states for long windows of time. The longest recorded medical fast in history, the guesses, 40 days.
Actually, there's been more than that.
Okay.
That's most people can't remember.
Right.
I think it was like,
About 72 hours once a month or so. It makes me
I think one of the ones that I heard about, wasn't it like 100 and something days?
366. 366 days, no food, water, minerals, IVs.
Oh, okay, so
Was somebody actually went a whole year?
It was a medically induced fast. He jumped like 40 sometimes. It's crazy
He was able to go a whole year?
without consuming food. Yes.
Dude, that's awesome.
So
that's with your,
No, it actually makes you feel great.
well, like your body, your.
he had enough metabolic reserves. And also when you are in a fasted state, your body typically recycles the least efficient tissue. Like your cancers and primarily disease scar tissue and recycles.
I was thinking more like all his gut would stop. Like it's flexion, you know what I mean? Like that, if it's not getting that, it's not exercising itself.
Oh, I understand what you're saying, peristalsis.
Yes, thank you.
The biggest thing is just whenever you come off of a fast, you have to start slow.
Same thing with your parasitic cleanses.
Yeah.
Parasites consume a significant amount of chemicals. So when we detox from parasites, we try and kill them. When they do die inside us, they release all the heavy metals back into the bloodstream. And that makes some people very, very sick. So if you're doing a parasitic cleanse, it has to be careful with a binder, like a diatomaceous earth or a activated charcoal in order to pull that stuff out of your body. Also charcoal, like what a cool thing where people used to, like if they were poisoned or food poisoned, they would pull charcoal out of the fire. And
I use a charcoal and fluid infused toothbrush.
I thought it was really cool that it was historically accurate where they had this like Viking tribe. And there's one thing that they showed on the TV, I was like, oh, cool. Where he like was poisoned by consuming some food that he was foraging for, some mushroom with it. And then he just took a bunch of charcoal, ate it, passed out, woke up, and
Doesn't garlic do the same thing? To a degree.
Garlic is a really heavy antimicrobial. Black garlic is superior. The majority of the garlic we receive is bleached. So you can be careful.
I just know, like, I actually took, one time I think, I thought that I had accidentally ingested some mold or whatever. And, I'm highly allergic to mold. And I had gotten some of those charcoal tablets and ate like a crap ton of garlic, because I like garlic anyways, and I was fine. But usually I get super sick.
Good strategy. When I ever get like a stomach bug, I'll fast, drink water, salts, minerals, and take activated charcoal, sweat it out 24 hours, and smooth sailing. Right? So, you want to starve a. Yeah, I forget the term.
Feed a cold, starve fever.
Yeah, that's kind of accurate, but really,
Is the other way around.
really, if you just fast in general, it'll upgrade your immune system and stimulate your progenitor and stem cells. Your body will go in and repair.
Most people don't, but most people don't fast long enough to actually get the benefits from it.
Correct. You have to get.
Sometimes I just sleep and say.
Yep.
And it's different for every person. It's different for every person, but like, I know for me, like, my favorite, like, and what helps me feel best is when I can fast for at least 16 to 20 hours. Like, it's great. The 1 meal and everything.
I get 48, I feel real good. When I get to 72, I'm like,
I've fasted for as much as 2 weeks before.
but that's a good reset, right? If my body is so dependent on sugar that it needs to switch to a food source, which is where ketosis.
It's also great for people who have, insulin resistance.
But it has to do it because they can't put them into it.
I was say, what about people like, have like really bad acid reflux or, things like that?
That would be a really good decision, and also you can pair that with enzymatic support, because most likely the liver and their pancreas is burdened, and they're not producing the enzymes needed in part of the stomach. Most of the time, the people with acid reflux here in practice, we just put them on digestive enzymes for like 2 weeks. They take away some of the chemical irritants. It knocks out acid reflux very quickly. So let's talk about various medications, because all of the meds that we take mess with methylation. Okay? Like your antacids will deplete vitamin B12. So people that have acid reflux, they're constantly putting antacids, Antax, that talcum-based powder. Also, the talcum powder was found to be heavily carcinogenic, specifically baby powder. Cholesterol meds depletes B12 and B9 or influences B12 and B9 absorption because of what it does to the liver. Metformin depletes B12. Carbamazepine as a B9 antagonist. That's one of your mental health-based medications. Oral contraceptives to keep the body in. All of your medications need something from your body to turn it on. Okay? Like all of your cholesterol medications, your lipidors, deplete, take CoQ10 away from the body. CoQ10 is an enzyme that helps make your muscle tissue work effectively. So wrap your head around this with me, guys.
That's why you have aching joints and stuff. Your arm is aching. She couldn't take cholesterol.
Or lonely.
Yes.
However, we are taking this medication to improve the incidences of death from cardiovascular disease. The heart is a really that. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, yeah, that makes sense. So, what are we going to do about it? guys, because I know we introduced some very interesting concepts tonight, and we also understand that there's a heavy environmental load, right? So we can either kind of bury our heads in the sand, keep things moving in the right direction, what we think is the right direction, and wait for symptoms to show up before we address our health, or we can take ownership over that. And how do we take ownership over that? Is by putting the right lifestyle factors in place. Because again, going all the way back full circle to the beginning of this conversation, what percentage of diseases in our country are genetically introduced or induced? 5%, meaning 95% of the crap that people are medically bankrupt for, because medical bankruptcy is the #1 form of bankruptcy in our country, right? Is something you have direct control over based upon the choices that you make, which comes down to spinal health and nervous system, your HPA axis, where we started this conversation, how your body perceives and manages stress. And that correlates back to your spinal health, orthopedic well-being, neurologic well-being. So, like you're talking about the red light thing, love it, beautiful thing. Where I kind of have a little bit of a bugaboo, or where I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit, this is where chiropractic and PT kind of find each other, is they're both valuable and they're both needed, right? But PT wants to strengthen and want to work on muscles and like build the best support system that you possibly can, which I agree with. But why would we want to build the most stable support system around a cracked telephone pole? Telephone pole's still cracked, right? So why don't we do it together? Why don't we fix the alignment and the structure of the spine through chiropractic biophysics, spinal biomechanics, putting curvatures back in place, and do all the strengthening conditioning things together to hold that stuff together so you don't default back into what happens, right? But it's meant to be done together. So that's where this process is very, very important for the regulation of our nervous system. And people with really crappy spines can go sit in the red light room and feel very well regulated for 30 minutes, a day, a week, but the underlying tension and dysfunction of the nervous system still remains. So you're synthetically upregulating neurologic performance versus fixing the actual problem. It has merit. It's going to help a lot of people, but the underlying issue is still there of the mechanical structure applying too much stress to neurology, where we have to do so much more to counterbalance the stressors. Does that make sense to you guys? Cool. And so that's where chiropractic care comes into play, and the data supports it, guys. There's a crazy amount of literature being published right now by not chiropractors talking about ortho, neuro coming together. I'm like, guys, I've been talking about it for 100 years. Finally, it's great. Okay, but we also have to support our detox pathways and support our metabolic well-being. So we are starting to dive into this world. We're offering various programs to help people with their methylation, with their detoxification. They have been wildly successful, very effective. My favorite person to talk about this, Stephen Fritchie. Come on. Stephen was hospitalized 3 times for diverticulitis flares, endoscopies, diseased tissue, put around a 6-month protocol for Blueprint. PhD formulator out of Florida made these guys. Really powerful protocol. But for the first time, as long as I had known, slips of the night for the first time, emotionally well regulated, no disease tissue in the digestive system after a 6-month protocol. Kathy had endoscopies, had disease tissue in her colon, went through one of these protocols, post endoscopy, no disease tissue, completely reversed the disease process, also reversed the diabetes as well. So most crazy outcome, couple both went on the protocol over a year's period of time. Gentleman dropped 110 pounds, woman dropped like 80 pounds, both reversed their diabetes. Another case, put him on a metabolic program, struggling with fertility, dropped 35 pounds, pregnant. Like, really cool stuff can happen when we dial in chemistry and dial in neurology, right? So these protocols, because I did price them out, and I was talking about the greens powder, the depth of this that he was able to put together, if you piece each individual piece, like 5 out of vitamin D supplement, I bought this mushroom powder, and I bought this, and I bought this. If you put that all together, it's like 6 to 10 grand if you're messing with it and figured out like, okay, I figured out cheap. But the protocols are actually fairly cost effective for it. So traditionally, we charge like 1,400, 1,800 for the 90-day or 6-month protocol. If you guys want, you don't have to do this like right now. But if you want to move forward with one of these, let me know. And because you attended this evening, we provide a discount for a saving if you want to move forward with one of those. Okay. As well, we obviously do a whole lot, and we're at a different tier of care when it comes to neurologic and orthopedic well-being. This is more for people who would not be practice members here, but all you guys are already, we already have the pleasure of caring for you guys. But your exam consultation usually at another office, or because I just went and did this, the orthopedic consultation was like $400 just for conversation. That resulted in nothing. It's very frustrating. I had a patient go to the hospital because they thought they fractured x-rays, or thought they fractured their ribs. A 2-view x-ray series was $150. Whoa. Okay. Neuro assessments, wildly expensive. Postures and range of motions, a little bit less in reference to orthopedic land. But you know, the value of what you guys receive here in your consultations and your exams is we charge pennies on the dollar. You guys are getting a ton of value with that. But for your loved ones, your family members, your friends, people that are struggling, that need this information, they're struggling needlessly just because they just don't know where to go or who to have on their team. If you want us to give them a call, shoot them a text, we can, but they will always be invited into the practice at $15 where they can get all these things done and then they can figure out what's the next step for them. So, guys, I hope this was a blessing to you. I know we covered some pretty heady topics. This is definitely in reference to our advanced workshops, the one that is the most like sciencey from like an organic chem standpoint, because we have to understand that process in order to really understand the impact of what it means. Right, that's what I'm just talking about. Right. But we have advanced workshops every month. We'd love for you guys to continue to attend. This month, if you would have brought a guest, you would have got 2 entries into our internal referral giveaway, and it's a $160 gift card for massage. So, so currently under care. So, so guys, if you guys have family members, friends, loved ones, every single month we do raffles and giveaways for people that bring additional people to these workshops or to the practice.
She's trying to bring my daughter, but she's got class from Wednesday.
Maggie was over here last month. Her and her husband get to go have a hot date night, House of Cards. They got a $150 gift card to House of Cards. So we always do fun stuff and giveaways. Really just want to feedback into you guys. But thank you so much for your time and attention. Hopefully everybody has a wonderful month.
We have a real world example, like right now.
Yeah, what you got?
Of this, you know how I'm cutting out a phosphate